Our next presenter is Sidarta Ribeiro. He is one of the most important neuroscientists of Brazil. He is the head of the Brain Institute in the Federal University of Rio Grande do Norte in the northeast of Brazil, where a series of studies are being conducted about ayahuasca. One of them was presented here by Braulio Araújo yesterday. They also have a few posters on the marketplace. Sidarta has been a long-term activist on issues of legalization of medical cannabis and recreational cannabis, and he's an expert he originally studied bird singing, and he studies sleeping and dreaming and consciousness, cannabis and ayahuasca. Welcome, Sidarta.
Can you guys hear me in the back? Yeah? Well, thank you, MAPS, for the invitation. Thank you, Bia, for the vision, for the stamina also. Put it all together here in the plant track. What I brought today for you is a discussion, some facts, some ideas. It's a discussion that has a scientific angle, but it has a political, sociological impact that we need to take into consideration. And I want to begin with this notion that perhaps one of the most ancient medicines that we have is cannabis. But before it was medicine, it was probably other things, right? It was probably our first true paper, rope, fabric. And we have evidence for millennia now that it was used for medical reasons. One of the most interesting of those evidences is this mummy found in the southeast region of Russia called Altai, near Mongolia. This mummy was found in '93. The burial site is very rich. It was covered with lots of gold adornments. And among the possessions there was a pouch of cannabis. And this mummy had a primary tumor in the breast with metastasis. So there's this possibility that the cannabis was being used for treatment, either of pain or of the tumor itself. The maiden, the Siberian ice maiden. She's also covered in tattoos, and there's a discussion that this may be indicative that she also played some shamanic role. Amazing tattoos, by the way. Nowadays, we have medical cannabis being used in several countries, in several states in the United States. So the medical use of cannabis became, in the past 10 years or 15 years, a really billion-dollar question. This is a big market, and then the question that arises is, which way should we go? Should we now get the plants and purify all the components and serve them as medicine, or is the plant still of any use? So the question is, which one is better, the whole plant or the isolated active principle? Most psychiatrists in Brazil, and I'm talking about a very specific cohort here, will say, well, there's no question about this. We know that the purified compounds are much better because you can control the dose. And then they will say, well, the plant is non-scientific, we shouldn't use the plant. And the reason, my motivation here is to question that. Not to go necessarily against it, but to question it. What is the science behind that assumption? So if we're going to talk about purified compounds, in the context of cannabis, we need to talk about delta-9 THC, and we need to talk about our hero, Raphael Mechoulam, the guy that first identified the psychoactive properties of THC in '64. You see here that the publications went up and then went down again. At the end of the '80s, the receptor was cloned, the first receptor, the CB1 receptor. There's also a CB2 receptor. So for the first time, we knew what in the body can receive that action, right? And then soon later, the first endogenous cannabinoid was discovered, right? It was named anandamide because ananda is bliss in Sanskrit. Also in the laboratory of Raphael Mechoulam, Israel has been in the forefront of cannabis research for decades now. And you can see that it exploded. I remember going to the Society for Neuroscience meeting that occurs annually in the United States. It has like 20,000, 30,000 scientists together every year. And I remember going as a student, as a PhD student, and I remember the moment in '96 when there were 10 posters about cannabinoids. And now you go there and it's a whole session. It's hundreds, sometimes thousands of researchers just doing that because the CB1 receptor is at the crossroads, the metabolic crossroads of many neurotransmitter systems. It can recruit the G proteins, it can recruit part of the proteins of other receptors. So it's really at the core of what the brain does. So it's not surprising that cannabinoids have so many different applications, right? So there are receptors, CB1 receptors in the brain, and also CB2 receptors throughout the body, and possibly other receptors. We know, still learning a lot about this, right? And the notion is that each of those substances, THC, CBD, CBN, and many other cannabinoids, will have very specific actions in those receptors. This is the popular notion. This is what usually the psychiatrist will say when he says, well, I have this drug here, this drug is specific for this receptor, and it's going to do something marvelous to you. But in fact, when you look at the affinities of the different ligands, in this case the endogenous ligands, the endogenous cannabinoids, to the different receptors, we'll see that it's quite promiscuous, it's quite messy. So the medical discourse of specificity is usually false. It's usually not based in real science. Right? So I'm a biologist, I'm not a medical doctor. I'm arguing against the overuse of science for medicine. Medicine should be more upfront about what it doesn't understand or how complex things are. And then Raphael Mechoulam, probably the least suspicious person in the world to talk about this, came up with this concept of entourage effect, in fact, in a paper with Ben Shabbat. And what is this concept? The concept is this, that the plant has over 70 cannabinoids and dozens of terpenes and many other substances that have medical implications, and that when they are together, they can have possibly better effects than when they are separate, right? They can buffer each other's dangerous effects, and they can boost each other's positive effects. This is not a concept that is coming out of the, countercultural movement, political movement. This is a scientific concept proposed by the guy that's pretty much created the whole field. So this should be taken seriously. Again, I'm talking about psychiatry in Brazil, which I know better. People really dismiss this notion as if it was non-scientific, when in fact it's coming from the roots of cannabinoid science. Now, let's give an example of what that means. We know that when people are psychotic, they should not have delta-9 THC. Delta-9 THC is very dangerous for people that have psychosis. However, they can have cannabidiol, CBD, all right. If they smoke pot that is very rich in CBD, some indica strain, they will be fine. This is antipsychotic, and now this is work of Brazilian psychiatrists, the work of Zuardi, the work of Halak. So I don't want to just say the bad side of it, there's the good side of it. No, it's true that there's non-psychoactive substances in cannabis which can be medicine for psychosis. So the debates, when people say, oh, marijuana should be forbidden for psychotic people, that's a wrong statement. The question is, which marijuana? Containing what? Right? On the other hand, we have people that are depressed, and we know that both THC and CBD have antidepressant properties. So then a mixture will be all right. Now, if we have to regulate, if we say, well, what is the marijuana that is safe for the general population? That marijuana is the one that contains a good mix of delta-9 THC and CBD in similar amounts, okay? And this is usually what you find. Most strains will have a mix of those things. So here, the moderation, to be in the middle, is the safe thing. And to be in the extremes is not the safe thing. Which means, if we are to only have purified compounds, these compounds can be dangerous for risk groups, while the plant tends to be much more tame. Right, now this is not something that is out of the mainstream. CNN did a complete U-turn on this issue. 10 years ago, they were having stories against medical marijuana. Now they are completely for it. Sanjay Gupta actually apologized for the CNN audience, saying, I was really mistaken. There's a lot of evidence. We should be legalized right away. And they're talking about the entourage effect. Because when we're talking about the entourage effect, we're talking about the good thing of having the whole plant, right? How many components are there with medical properties? Well, over 100. You see here different cannabinoids with anti-inflammatory, immunosuppressive, anoretic, bone stimulant, anti-epileptic, and so on. So in fact, the problem for the industry here is that it's a single plant that represents a whole pharmacopoeia. And that's not going to give a lot of money to the industry if the plant is used. Therefore, you need the discourse that the plant is non-scientific, right? And we're not even mentioning the terpenes, the perfumed components that exist in fruits and exist in marijuana that can actually make it cross the blood barrier, the blood-brain barrier easily, and it can also contain some of the negative effects of THC on working memory. So the terpenes can add on this. Many, many different terpenes with different properties. This is a very good review, Ethan Russo's review. So we even know that when Marinol, which is pure synthetic THC, was used to control pain and spasms in multiple sclerosis, it was found in the end that it was much better to have a mix of THC and CBD. That the CBD alone is not so good, so it's better to have the mix. And this shouldn't come as a surprise. Nobody will argue that it's better to take vitamins than eat fruit. Right? Nobody will say that, oh, it's anti-scientific, you shouldn't be eating this fruit, you should be taking the vitamins as pills. So this is the crazy argument that some psychiatrists are starting to make, and we should be very aware of that. Now, on the airplane, I decided to find how many studies are there talking specifically about cancer, so linking to the Siberian ice maiden, the use of cannabis for cancer, right? So for years, we've known that if you're undergoing oncological therapy, cannabis can help with your symptoms, can help you eat better, sleep better, feel less anxious, and so on. But now there's mounting evidence that cannabis is anti-tumoral itself. It acts on the cause of the problem and not just on the consequences of the problem. This is the current situation. There are 18 publications on the use of cannabis, on the successful use of cannabis or cannabinoids for glioma, breast cancer, lung cancer, colon, liver, melanoma, prostate, thyroid, non-melanoma, skin cancer, and pancreas. So this is just mounting. Now we're poised to see another U-turn in policy because high levels of cannabinoids, even injected in the tumor or taken orally, will become and are becoming actually clinical practice. Now, what about the entourage effect? What is the evidence that if you combine things, they get more potent? So this is an interesting study, right? This is the relative invasiveness of tumor cells in the medium, in the plate, in the dish. And you see that in the control, you have this 100% level. With THC, it comes down. With CBD, it comes down, but not as much. But when you combine them, it gets even stronger. So this is the entourage effect. This is what it is about. When you combine them, they get stronger. This is another study, also with glioma, with a model of glioma. And this is a combination with radiotherapy as well. So you see here the dose of radiotherapy, and with the untreated, and then with CBD, and then with THC, and the combination much better. And again, for this other cell line, the combination is much better. So it seems like the best thing is do radiotherapy combined with cannabis, with cannabinoids, which come together in the plant. So why would you purify them to then put them together again? That wouldn't make any economical sense, unless we're talking about profits. This is say it again? Oh. So here we see the tumor volume, right? With untreated, it keeps going up at 21 days. It's really big, 50% bigger. If you add the cannabinoids, much less, just the irradiation, but it goes up. The irradiation only doesn't do it, but if you combine irradiation with cannabinoids, then you have very good effects. So this is the future. This is where we're going with this, and that is against the regular discourse, right? So what is the situation here? The situation is that we have a plant that has over 70 cannabinoids, dozens of terpenes, and depending on how you mix them, you can have completely different effects. So in one plant, you have many different kinds of medicines. So the shaman, the Siberian ice maiden, had several different strains in her hands, probably. So, some were good for delivery, some were good for working out and doing a lot of hard work, some for sleeping, some for having a conversation, having fun. Depending on these combinations, you're going to have completely different effects, right? Different plants for different effects. That's exactly what the industry doesn't want to hear, right? And now I want to draw a parallel with dogs. Dogs did not exist 15,000 years ago, and marijuana did not exist as it is now 15,000 years ago. These are inventions of the Mesolithic and Neolithic periods. Men, the humankind, our ancestors, started to select the strains that were most useful and generated finely tuned strains for specific usages. You don't want that dog with your baby, right? You don't want that dog defending your house necessarily. So So again, people say, oh, dogs are marvelous. We made dogs marvelous. So why is it that marijuana is so effective for so many different diseases? And say, oh, God sent us marijuana is such a miracle. No, we created marijuana. So just the idea of making it illegal is absurd because this is the inheritance that we have. A lot of hard work. Could you ask, are dogs beneficial, dogs harmful? Should we legalize dogs? That wouldn't make any sense. But these are the questions that we are asking about marijuana. And we should be very aware of that. Thanks, but Bia's going to cut me, so I need to go fast. Just to continue, when people say that cannabis in natura, you know, the whole plant is dangerous, but isolated active principles are not dangerous, this is scientific, this is a lie. Because we've known these elements here these components here for maybe 40 years, 50 years, and very limited scientific knowledge about them, but this is tried and tested. This is safe and sound. This has been for years. It's like saying that natural birth is very dangerous, but cesarean birth is very, very safe, which is not true. I want to finish, if you give me 3 minutes more, talking a little bit about ayahuasca, because ayahuasca is, by definition, an entourage effect. It's a combination of two plants. You have components that act on different receptors. It's not that specific, acts on a variety of receptors, elevate the levels of neurotransmitters, right? So a lot of testing to get to this combination, you know, through centuries in the Amazon. And now we know from the work of Steven Srin, who's here, and he's going to talk, he's going to give the last talk, no, the second to last talk today in the same room here, please come. This is work using, looking for the effects of harming one of the components of ayahuasca on neuronal proliferation, and it's showing that it induces the proliferation of cells that will lead to neurons, that are precursors to neurons. So this is a substance that can induce, you know, let's say your brain is going to grow on that substance, okay? And this is a paper that is deposited in archives. It's also from Steven's group, showing that another component, this is not a component of ayahuasca because this is 5-methoxy DMT, but it's similar to an NDMT, and it's showing that it affects protein expression of a variety of different functions, in particular plasticity, dendritic sprouting, you know, changes in synapses. So imagine what those things are doing in combination. This is the next project that Stevens is already preparing to run. And just to give an idea of what that could mean in terms of therapeutics, this is the work of Braulio de Araújo that he presented, he's also here in the room, presented yesterday, and Fernanda Pagliano, the first author of the paper. You see that what happens, the antidepressant effects of ayahuasca after 7 days, much better here than the placebo, and this is not what you get with a pure compound of ketamine. I'm not saying the ketamine is bad, I'm saying it's less effective than this complex mixture. Now, to make it even more complex and give me 1 more minute, because she's going to like that. Ayahuasca is not just the substance, it's also the setting. It comes with a tried and tested setting. So just to build on what Jose Carlos Bozo just said, we need to focus on the whole therapeutics and not just on the substance, right? This is also what Thomas Insel said yesterday, that it's much more complicated than the dose of the drug you're taking, right? So we need to focus on what you're taking as a substance. We also need to focus on the set. Are you genetically fine to take this drug? Do you have a polymorphism that we should worry about? And we should worry about the setting, right? We should worry about the technologies, the social technologies that make something safer, boost the good and mitigate the bad. And to finish, which one is better, whole plant or isolated active principle? Well, let's be scientific about it. It depends. Thanks.
Hello? Oh, questions?
Oh, gracias. Muito obrigado.
De nada.
Bom dia.
Bom dia.
So I find it very interesting how you're saying about the THC and the CBD. So in San Francisco, I don't know if you know it's very, very easy to get marijuana and
Really?
yes. But it's very popular to get the highest THC percentage, and you could get like 27, 29, or even higher. And it's very, very popular, and it's selling very well. But I'm just wondering, are there any studies as far as the effects of smoking that kind of marijuana? And also, if there's no studies on that, just some ideas in your head of like what are the possible like side effects of smoking something like that. So with such a high THC property, and usually then those strains, the CBD property is very, very low. It's maybe 1%, maybe 2% or even lower. So.
I think you have a very good point. The day legalization really becomes reality in the whole world, we will need to regulate those things carefully, right? You can drink beer that is 7% alcohol, you can drink beer that is 12% alcohol, but you cannot drink beer that is 80% alcohol, because that's poison, right? The difference between, it makes a difference between poison and medicine. In the case of cannabis, it's very clear that if it has high levels of CBD, you can up the THC, because that's going to be safe. But if you up the THC and you don't up the CBD, then the people in the risk group, the 1% of the population that is psychotic or prone to psychosis, these will be at risk. And this is something that the anti-prohibitionist movement needs to embrace completely. We need to understand that to be pro-legalization is also to be pro-regulation.
Yes. All right. Thank you. First of all, before my question, which was similar to the last one, so I'll just add one little bit of information. I'd just like to tell the people that there are Brazilian psychiatrists that don't believe that the isolated active ingredients are better.
There's
so I'm
here.
one of them. So
actually, all of them are here.
Yeah, probably. So, but I am an exception in Brazil. The point I wanted just to make was about the importance of controlling cannabinoids in terms for public health. So saying that THC is dangerous for people with psychosis is probably not an argument for keeping marijuana illegal. No. It's on the contrary. You can only control that and protect people if it's legal. So I just want to add that point.
No, I think you made a very good point. When people say, in Brazil, the conservatives say, oh, if we free marijuana, liberar, to use the word liberar, to free marijuana is going to be very dangerous. Marijuana is really, really free right now, free of any control, free of any regulation, no quality control, we don't know what's in there. So we needed to know what is in there to regulate. And again, it doesn't have to be only CBD. The terpenes, which are so good and perfumed, they can also tame some of the negative effects of THC in memory. So we can make a flower that smells better, and it's better for your health, but we need to know those things. And the only way we can know those things is to remove it from the black market.
So I wanted to thank you for bringing up this topic, because I think it's very important, and there's not a lot of talk about it here. And I wanted to ask, it seems overwhelmingly the studies with psilocybin are with a purified compound rather than a mushroom itself. Do you have any comments about that?
This is interesting, right? We are not aware, I'm not aware, I'm not aware of other components in the mushroom that may be interesting for the experience. On my own experience, I have the impression that with ayahuasca, as well as with mushrooms, the other things which are there, which make you, I'm going to say something, people will hate me, but the stuff that makes you sick in there has a spiritual function, right? If you go down first, if you clean yourself, if you have to face your own dirt to then come out clean, that sounds a lot like Christianism to me. That sounds a lot like I suffer first and then I go up. I'm saying this respectfully, but again, it's my impression. Now, that's dealing with the more psychological effects. Now, are there components in the mushroom, not psilocybin, not other stuff related to psilocybin? Are there other things which are important? We don't know.
And what about freeze-dried ayahuasca for research? What is your opinion on that?
Everything for research is good.
Thank you, Sidarta.